Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Dragoș Epina and I'm a pet portrait artist based in Belgium. For today's video I put together a complete guide for graphite pencils for beginners and I'm going to teach you everything I've learned so far with this medium. I really hope you're going to enjoy this video and learn from it because I know I did my best to explain everything as clear as possible. Without further ado, let's get to the video. What are graphite pencils? A graphite pencil, also called a lead pencil, is a type of pencil in which a thin graphite core is embedded in a shell of other material. The pencil shell is mostly wooden, but can be as well made out of plastic or recycled paper. I just have a set of 6 pencils with an HB, 2B, 4B, 6B, 8B and 10B, and these are going to be used in this tutorial today. I made some swatches of my set and blended them out using a Q-tip. You don't need a whole range. A HB, 2B, 4B and 8B should be enough to create a great artwork. Soft leads are graded by using the letter B to designate how black the mark they make is. Numbers are then used to indicate the degree of softness. The higher the number, the softer the lead and the blacker the mark. For example, a 2B lead is softer than a B lead and will produce a blacker mark. A 4B is softer than a 2B and so on. Hard leads are graded in the same way but use an H to show how hard they are. A 2H is harder than an H and the 6H is really hard. HB leads are considered to be the happy medium on the graphite scale. Now let's talk about tools. To work in graphite, you need of course graphite pencils. As previously said, I have a set of 6 pencils from HB to 10B. They are full graphite pencils, which means the lead isn't in the middle of 2 pieces of wood. A great way to sketch the outline of your subject is using a mechanical pencil. The tip stays always sharp and will assure very fine lines, making it ideal for small and fine details as well. The next important tool is paper. For graphite drawings, a smooth Bristol paper will be ideal. The smooth surface creates great details and can hold lots of layers, plus the end result has a very soft look without any heavy texture. I am using the Strathmore Bristol 300 series smooth paper, which is amazing and I totally recommend it to smooth paper lovers. One of the most popular tools for blending graphite are the blending stumps. They are used to blend, smear or smudge graphite, charcoal or similar mediums. The next must-have tool is the kneaded eraser. These are great to create highlights and even lighten up the sketch or correct mistakes. Another very popular blending tools are the Bristol brushes. I am using very cheap ones from the dollar store. Bear in mind that the synthetic ones are doing a better job with graphite. Because with graphite you can't achieve a very deep black, I am using as well a black pencil from Faber-Castell Polychromos to help me with that. For very big areas and backgrounds, I use a piece of paper towel wrapped up around my finger for more precision. These are one of the cheapest blending tools out there. Their small tip makes them perfect for blending very small areas. You can achieve a very nice and smooth look with Q-tips. My favorite fine tip eraser is the Tom Bomono eraser. These are excellent quality and erase the graphite very easily, perfect for very bright highlights. When your pencil gets too small to be used, don't throw it away, use a pencil extender instead. It will make the pencil usable again and save you some money as well. To create very bright highlights, I am using a white pencil. It is great for the highlights in the eyes, mouth, or nose. Please bear in mind this isn't archival, so it will fade in time, making it not usable for commissions or other kind of client work. My must-have sharpener is a manual one. The one I'm using isn't pricey at all and does a great job. The hand sharpener kept breaking the pencil leads because I applied too much pressure, but this one keeps the pencil in place and never breaks it. To clean the pencil residue, I use a soft big brush. Avoid cleaning your paper with the hand, as it can leave some very nasty marks. Now let's find out what are the 5 elements of shading. The shading is made out of 5 important elements. The cast shadow, which is very dark or black, the shadow, which is dark gray, the mid-tone that has a medium gray color, the reflected light that has a light gray color, and the highlight, which is white. While you watch me shade this circle, I am going to explain what each of the 5 elements mean. The shadow is not the edge of the subject, but rather the shadow on the object that shows its rounded surface. This is a dark gray tone, and it can be found where an object has protruded and the surface recedes to the other side. The mid-tone is the true color of your object, unaffected by the light, and it has no shadow. The highlight is the part of your subject that receives the most light. If you want to notice the reflected light, have a look at the sphere and you'll see a subtle rim of light along the edge of the shadow side. This is the light bouncing up from the surface and coming from behind. It is the element most often left out of a drawing. Yet, without it separating the shadow edge and the cast shadow, your object will look flat. The cast shadow is the shadow the object you are drawing casts onto a surrounding surface. It is often the darkest part of your drawing because this is where the light is completely blocked. It should be drawn in as close to black as possible. As it comes out from the subject, it will start to appear lighter. Another important thing to bear in mind is the pencil pressure. Avoid shading using shaky lines, as it will turn out scribbly and very childish looking, especially if your goal is to achieve a realistic look. As the previous one, this kind of shading isn't ideal for a realistic look as well. The final result will be messy, and the inconsistency in the pencil marks can be seen. The best way for a smooth blending is to use an even pencil stroke. This will spread the pigment evenly on the paper and give the shading a soft look. I recommend using this technique for realistic drawings. To show you how they would look like blended, I use the Bristol brush to spread the pigment on the paper. It is obvious how the messy pencil strokes affect the end result. How to create a dark-light gradient. To create a dark to light gradient, I started by applying a hard pressure on the pencil and slowly lifting it up towards the light area. I repeated the process until I achieved the desired values. To blend them together, I used a small Bristol brush. Try to apply the brush in the same direction as the pencil strokes as much as possible. If it isn't dark enough, make a few more strokes and repeat the process. Do's and don'ts for shading with graphite. The biggest mistake when shading is to hurry up and scribble. Just take your time and build up the shadow gradually. The correct way is using smooth lines from dark to light, lifting up the pencil towards the highlight. This takes a few layers, but the quality of the end result is great compared to the previous method. When you are using a blending stamp to push the pigment into the paper, don't jump right in with a heavy hand. This is a mistake a lot of beginners do. It will only create very dark marks and mess up your shading. The right way is to use light pressure and build up the tones you want. 6 ways to blend graphite. The first way is by simply using a pencil. I am using circular movements and press as easy as possible towards the bright area. This is ideal if you are a fan of more textured look and don't want to achieve a soft blending. Hold the pencil as far from the tip as possible and almost parallel with the paper. It will help a lot to have more control over the pressure. Build your layers up and don't hurry. The second way is to use a blending stamp. I find this very helpful to create a base layer because, with the right amount of pressure, you can achieve a very smooth look, perfect for adding details with the pencil on top. It is also time saving to use a bigger one for backgrounds or bigger areas of the drawing. This is a very popular and cheap way to blend graphite. The Q-tips are made out of cotton, ideal for achieving a smooth effect. You need to have some pigment on the paper before using it. As for the other tools, a light pressure is required. My favorite way to blend is using a bristle brush. These come in a lot of sizes, ideal for most of the parts of the artwork. The bristles are synthetic, which makes them harder than the natural haired ones. A thing to keep in mind when using this method is to start from dark to light and easily drag the pigment towards the light area. If you notice the marks get too dark, it is a sign the brush is too loaded. To fix that, simply rub it on a piece of paper towel or a piece of cloth. Another very cheap and popular way to blend is using a piece of paper towel. This is great for big areas such as backgrounds. You can wrap it around your finger or fold it depending on the area you're working on. It is great as well from keeping the skin oils from touching the paper and leave marks. Creating highlights with graphite is very easy, as the pigment can be picked up very easy compared to color pencils. Two of the best ways are using a kneaded eraser and a fine point eraser, in this case the Tombow mono eraser. I mostly use the kneaded eraser for large areas and to lighten up my sketch, and the Tombow mono eraser for the very tiny regions of the drawing, especially highlights in the eyes, nose and mouth. 8 types of pencil shading. Hatching is an artistic technique used to create tonal or shading effects by drawing closely spaced parallel lines. The main concept is that the quantity, thickness and spacing of the lines will affect the brightness of the overall image and emphasize forms, creating the illusion of volume. Hatching lines should always follow the form of the object. By increasing the quantity and the thickness of the lines, a darker area will result. Cross-hatching is basically shading using X movements. It is very similar with the previous one. By adding more lines in the same place, a thicker and darker shading will result. I like to use this way of shading on top of a smooth base layer to darken it up. The idea behind circlism is that when you are shading, you draw no lines at all. The technique uses varied and overlapped circles, building transparent layers. The circles do not have to be perfect to achieve this effect. This is great for a smooth blending later on with bristle brushes, Q-tips or blending stumps. The contouring shading is very similar to hatching and cross-hatching, the only difference being the shape of the lines. It is made out of overlapped curved lines, great for drawing lips. As in the previous methods, by adding more lines in the same place, a thicker and darker shading will result. The next way is using scribbles to shade. They don't have to be the same size and shape, just draw random shapes. It does look very similar with the circulium shading. This is very fun to do, as you don't have to mind the shapes too much. Stippling is a drawing technique in which areas of the light and shadow are created using nothing but dots. It is known as well as pointillism. The basic idea is simple. For darker areas, apply a greater number of dots and keep them close together. The closer you get to the light area, the less dots have to be drawn. This is almost identical to the hatching method, the only difference is using short dashes instead of long lines. To create a darker area, draw more overlapped dashes. Towards the light area, reduce the amount of dashes. This is one of the most popular blending technique for realistic drawings. It is totally different from the other ones, as none of the pencil marks are visible after pushing the pigment into the paper. This can be done using a blending stump, bristle brushes or Q-tips. To increase the darkness, add more pencil marks and blend them out. Now let's put into practice some of the things mentioned in this tutorial. I chose to make a fast drawing of this cute gray-titted bird. I chose this subject for the high contrast and because I totally love birds. Who wouldn't love such an amazing creature? I always start a drawing with the eyes because I think they are the soul of an artwork. I use the black pencil to fill in the whole circle, followed by adding highlights with the white gel pen and the Tombow mono eraser. As I mentioned before, the white pen isn't archival. Use good quality acrylic instead. This drawing won't be for sale, that's why I'm able to use the white pen. I began the head and the chest area with a base layer. It will help me fill in those areas faster and divide the dark area from the light one. I used the blending stamp to push the graphite into the paper. I didn't go too dark because I wanted to preserve those highlights. I started adding the details on the head by determining where the darkest areas are placed. I used the black pencil for a very deep dark color and pressed very hard to achieve a rich black. I think this simple step already brings the drawing to life. I drew the feathers using very small lines as it is very similar to fur. I made sure to follow the growth of the feathers on the head's bone structure. You can notice how I am preserving the light area in the middle of the head by drawing around it. I love to use the black pencil for the dark areas because it doesn't shine in direct contact with the light. A 10B graphite pencil will shine for sure, giving the bird a washed out effect, and I was really looking to keep that high contrast as strong as possible. Sharpen your pencil as soon as the lines get too thick. This is an important tip for realistic feathers. Towards the end, I used the Tombow mono eraser to add a couple of more highlights. After finishing the dark areas, I moved to one of the light sections. I used a loaded blending stamp to settle the dark areas, followed by adding very fine lines on top of those layers with a 10B graphite pencil. Marking those areas saved me a lot of time as they will be visible, not requiring too many drawn feathers. I used the kneaded eraser to lighten up some areas. As always, I created a base layer, but this time using as well a Q-tip to show you how it works in this drawing. Because I couldn't get the darkness I wanted, I darkened up the area using a blending stamp. It is harder than the Q-tip, which will push the pigment better into the paper, resulting in a darker base layer. With the 10B graphite pencil, I added an even layer of longer feathers, followed by another set of feathers with the black pencil, and you can see how strong the difference is. I could get darker lines with the 10B if I would push harder, but they wouldn't be as dark as these ones. Without that sharp pencil tip, I wouldn't be able to draw the fine feathers. I am following as well the way they grow on the wing. This part was so much fun to draw and fast as well. I first drew the dark and bold lines, then blended them out with the blending stamp. I knew it won't make them disappear as I pressed very hard, but had to darken them up a bit in the end anyway. You can notice how efficient the Tombow mono eraser is in these tiny areas. I could have used the kneaded eraser as well, but it isn't as hard as this one. It would only bend and I would have to keep modeling it. To show you more ways to create a base layer, I chose the bristle brush for this part. It was loaded with graphite from previous uses, so I had to be careful not to leave any unwanted marks. One tip when using a brush to blend is to drag the graphite pigment towards the light area and easily lift it up. With the 10B pencil, I started adding some details using a light pressure. I don't want the feathers to be too dark at this stage. To darken up the base layer, I chose again my trusted friend, the blending stamp. It was loaded as well with graphite from previous layers, and I didn't want very dark shadows, that's why I didn't add some pigment first. Please bear this in mind when using a blending stamp to create shadows. If the tip looks too dark, it's a sign of being loaded with a lot of pigment, and it can mess up your drawing if you use it like this for a light area. What I usually do is cleaning it on a spare piece of paper or paper towel. By doing this, I am able to see how strong the shadows will be after the blending stamp is clean. I could have used a bigger one for this area to save some time, but that would increase as well the risk of leaving a bigger mark in case I did a mistake, making it harder to correct. Because I noticed I didn't use the mechanical pencil at all, I decided to show you it can work as well for very fine details, not only sketching. The lid is HB, so not dark, perfect for the base fur. What I love about this is that you never have to sharpen it to get fine details. I am holding it as far as possible from the tip for less pressure. Towards the last layers, I switched to the 10B pencil for more depth. Another trick is to keep rotating your pencil to always use the sharp side. It saves time and your pencil will leave more. For some highlights, I used the kneaded eraser. Now I guess you are wondering why it is attached to the end of my pencil. This was my idea to always have an eraser as close as possible instead of looking for it on my... It is very convenient as you just have to turn the pencil around and erase. All you have to do is rip off how much eraser you want and attach it at the end of your pencil. The tail was identical with the bottom part of the wing as I used the same methods. I love how it makes the white area pop out and the drawing wouldn't look complete if the tail would have been hid behind the body. With a Q-tip, I created the base layer for the branch, followed by using the black pencil to draw the bird shadow. I used the Faber-Castell Polychromos black pencil for the entire area. To give it a branch-like look, I drew some horizontal lines, blended them out with the blending stamp, and repeated the process. The branch wasn't a part of the main focus in this drawing, that's why I chose not to detail it too much. I lightened up the little legs as well to create a higher contrast. Now we came to an end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it and you've learned a lot from it. I am posting one time a week and normally graphite, colored pencil or pastel related videos. So if you don't want to miss any of those, please hit that subscribe button and the bell button as well to be notified every time a video goes live. And I really hope I'm going to see you in the next one as well. Have a nice day. Bye guys!